America's getting older, primarily. And so we're seeing a lot of sellers who are saying, you know what?
Litigation is a sport of kings. You better have a deep pocket.
The day you start your business is the day you start to plan.
Don't spend your money before you have it.
Hey everyone, welcome to Business Unchained, where entrepreneurs and business owners come together to power up on their journey to greatness.
Bobby Masha is the founder and CEO of Greenridge Wealth Planning. All opinions expressed by Bobby and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinion of Greenridge Wealth Planning. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any financial decisions. Clients of Greenridge Wealth Planning may maintain positions in any securities discussed in this podcast.
All right, so I have two gentlemen here that I've known for years. They are they're going to come with some really interesting stories, which we're excited to hear. But they just had their 25th anniversary of being in business. They're almost into their 26th. They were awarded in 2022 the Deal of the Year by M&A Advisor, and it was the industry's category between 50 and 100 million. Stu and Norm, they've been working together in some capacity since 1986, so a long history. Even though they separated for a while, they came back and have forged quite a business. Really excited to bring these two guys on today. We got a soccer star coach and a hockey coach and star himself. Stu, Norm, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so Stu Brown, Norm Kallen, you guys have your own law firm focusing on M&A work, specifically trying to match the buyer and the seller. And, I'd love to just hear a little bit about kind of your stories and what got you interested in the field of business that you're in. And, like I said, I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the more interesting cases that you guys have worked on. Sure. And, get into some of the things that you guys have learned yourself in terms of what's made you guys a successful law firm.
Absolutely. Sure.
Absolutely.
Right. So who wants to start?
Stu, I'll start. I'll tell you, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about how we got started, which will kind of frame the picture for you. So back in 1998, actually, I was working as general counsel of a small publicly traded company in New Jersey. And that was when the dot-com bubble was getting bigger and bigger, and it was about to burst. And we realized that there's really no money in a pre-revenue company. And the investment bankers who worked with the company decided that it was a good idea to merge a publicly traded U.S. company into a pre-revenue company out of Central America. And at that point, I was in my early 30s, and I said to myself, I'm dumb, but I'm not that stupid. This doesn't seem like it's going to work. So I outsourced myself along with one of our current partners who was the associate general counsel. And we started in the basement of an accounting firm with 2 computers and an AV switch for the internet. And we took it from there. And long story short, we were pretty smart because that company was ultimately delisted and they became our first client and ultimately went bankrupt. So things happen for a reason.
Wait, they became your client and then you bankrupt?
No, we didn't help them become bankrupt, but they ultimately went bankrupt. So it worked out better for us in the long run. Let's put it that way. So long story short, we started our practice and there were just 2 of us and we built it up over the past 26 years or so. Norman joined us 2002. So he's almost off probation. And once he's off probation, he'll be a partner and we'll keep going from there.
I'm excited about that possibility.
What got you first interested in in transaction work and dealing with this kind of?
So it just kind of happened, right? I mean, we were corporate lawyers. We were representing businesses, doing general work, contracts, shareholders agreements, employment agreements, what have you. And then like everything in business, it's cyclical. And when approximately 2010, 2011 rolled around, there were a lot more mergers and acquisitions going on because America was getting grayer and people wanted to sell their businesses. And they started coming to us saying, okay, you guys come out of big firm practices and we need an alternative because we're not a huge company. So they came to us and we started doing a lot of merger and acquisition work, primarily on the sell side, representing business owners who were looking to exit. That was all pretty much pre-private equity. So the buyers were basically strategic business owners themselves, larger companies that wanted to grow. And so we cut our teeth doing that. And then throughout the 20 teens, there were a lot of private equity groups that started forming. And all of a sudden, there was all this capital sitting out there dying for investment. And the M&A market started to explode, literally. So what you read about in the Wall Street Journal are the billion-dollar deals. We're not involved in those. We're dealing with people on Main Street who are doing deals between, call it, 10 and a couple $100 million.
So at what point did you look at your, I guess, your profession? You said you the writing was on the wall, and you went and you guys started your own firm.
Right.
What was that thought process in terms of not just leaving to go to another firm, but saying, you know what, we're going to hang our own shingle?
First of all, we met at a large firm. That's where we cut our teeth. Both of us went separate ways, but we all realized that working for a large law firm is not a life. I mean, some people enjoy it. It's great. You know, you can make a lot of money in it if you stick it out. But if you want to have a family, if you want to raise your kids, it's no place to do it. And so we ultimately formed our firm more out of necessity than desire, because as I said, the company that we worked for was pretty much going to go out of business. I turned to my wife when we started our practice. I said, honey, one of two things is going to happen here. Either we're going to be successful and we're going to stay in New Jersey, or we're moving to Florida. And she said, why would we move to Florida? And I said, because if this doesn't work, I want to put smiles on people's faces, and I'm going to scoop ice cream in Florida, because you could do it 12 months a year. So far it's worked out, you know, we'll see. Maybe I'll scoop ice cream someday, but not quite yet.
What were some of the things that you were not ready for when you opened up your own shop?
We don't have enough time, Bobby. I mean, ultimately, you have to be a manager. I had no idea how to be a manager. You have to know how to basically handle a spreadsheet and a financial statement, which I had a good background in, but when you're doing it for yourself, it's a whole nother story,
different, right?
As you know. Dealing with vendors is something very interesting, because they want to be paid yesterday and your clients want to pay you tomorrow. So you have to deal with cash flow. So there are a whole plethora of things, you know, just becoming a business owner. And that's one of the things that resonates with our clients. People say, well, you don't understand. We're like, no, we do understand. We are business owners. We have to make payroll every week, you know, like you.
It's just a different experience when you're dealing with it yourself versus learning from the third hand, the third party. You know, there's so many people who are, you know, they work for somebody and they think that they get it. And
right.
Just like you said, until those notices start coming in and those bills start coming in and the employees
until it's yours and you're losing sleep over it at night, you don't appreciate what's involved.
So Norm, your turn, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Stuart and I met back in the late 80s at a large firm. I went with a medium-sized firm for all the 90s, and then I went in-house. I had an opportunity in 99 to go in-house with clients of mine who had a business, sold it, and then decided to start up a new company. And it was in the software area. It was in supply chain. I'd known them. We had gotten our MBAs together as well. And I said, you know something, you don't often get that opportunity to go in-house with people you like, and also people with a lot of cash. I'll joke around and say nothing beats a startup company with a lot of cash. It's a great experience because it allows you to grow the way you want to grow. But also you learn an important lesson when you go in-house. Most lawyers don't get that opportunity to see a business from the inside out. To your point, when you're with a large firm, you're almost an employee and you're dealing from the outside in. When you're in the inside out, you see the issues that come up, you see the problems that come up, you see what the business owner is concerned with, and you have a different perspective. I know when I was there, the first month I was there, we were looking to make an acquisition. I didn't like the term sheet. The principal of the company asked me to take a look at it. I said, listen, this needs a little bit of work. I don't like it. I'm not sure it's a great deal for us. The software engineers desperately wanted the company. It had a great platform, they thought. So they thought, I'll say it now. And he said, Norman, make it happen. That's what a business owner is all about. Make it happen. Most lawyers, they're scared to death of change. They're scared to death of risk. Business owners live with it day in and day out. You have to.
Yeah, there's no bureaucracy to hide behind.
Not at all.
And if you do, you're not becoming...
You won't go anywhere. You're dry in the vine. We built the company up. It grew from 99 from 8 people to almost 150 within 2 years.
That's explosive growth.
It was explosive. There was a lot of money involved, a lot of acquisitions involved. So it was exciting. But there were no timesheets involved for a lawyer, which was great. So you didn't lose sleep. You didn't lose sleep. You don't often get that. It's not often the case for lawyers. But you also learn an important lesson that when the public doesn't buy into your product concept, longevity is not going to be in your vocabulary. And so that was a different experience. We ramped up very quickly, exceptionally interesting, really, really smart people we had. both in the United States and India as well. And it really was. It was enjoyable to go to work. It was a smart place, a lot of good people. But I think it was too early for the technology in the supply chain area we were trying to get into. Now it's very commonplace. It wasn't back then. So it was tough. We're looking for first equity player to bring in the pharma space. So we started to ramp down. And that is also, when you haven't done that before, a new experience, because you're letting people go that are really good people for no reason other than we can't pay you. Tough to do. So it was not easy. Well, while that was happening, out of nowhere, and this is how Stu and I got back together again, I get a call one day, the phone call, someone says, the front desk says, there's a Stu Brown on the phone. So I pick up the phone and Stu says, hey, Norm, it's Stuart Brown. Remember me? We met at the big firm. He goes, I was looking for someone's name in the lawyer's diary and I saw your name. I haven't spoken in years. I just called up and said, how you doing?
Was that a bullshit excuse to reach out to him?
It was a wrong number. I just
been there, done that before. I know the experience, right? Yeah. Another wrong number. So, we started the conversation. What are you doing? He gave me his background of having been in-house and going back out and starting the firm. I explained to where I was because I knew as we were letting people go. At some point, I was going to outsource myself because it was just a matter of time. And so I said to him, we said, let's have lunch.
Sounds fortuitous. I mean, good timing, right?
Yeah. This was back in 2002. And so we had lunch, and it was a very good lunch. We talked about what he did. He was a corporate lawyer, which I like because that's what I like to do. We pursued it. We had a couple more lunches. We figured, let's see, how do we make this work? When I had gone in-house, I had built up a nice business network, and I had to jettison the network because obviously I didn't need clients anymore. I had one client. But I was confident enough that I knew that once I went back out again in private practice, I could do it all over again. I had a very good mentor in the 90s, someone who was a superb networker, really taught me the ins and outs of how to meet people, how to develop relationships with people, how to provide referrals and get referrals. And I said, I'll do it again. And I told my wife, and I was fortunate a little bit like Stuart, that his former client or his former boss said, listen, I'll give you a retainer, you'll become my client. Well, same thing in my situation. Although we're ramped down, they were nice enough to say, we'll give you a monthly retainer for a year, see how it works out. And that paid my bills.
So what is your mindset on building business? If, going through that with your mentor, what were some of the key things that you learned in that process that you took with you into your own private practice?
It's always important to give first. That's the key. Look to help people. Because when you help people, as he used to say, you got them. They're going to want to come back and help you in some way. So always look to do that. And it takes time. Developing a relationship, developing business takes time. I call it times 2. It doesn't happen overnight, which is important. And you have to put the time in. Stuart and I are very good about getting out there, meeting people during the week, meeting people on weekends for breakfast, et cetera. It's a slow grind. And you have to do that with a sense of sincerity as well. It can't be you can't be the, I don't want to use a derogatory term, but car salesman.
Yeah. No.
This is the best thing ever. You got to do that. And you got to look to give to people. That's the most important thing.
Well, it takes people a while to get to know one another.
Of course.
And once you start to get to know them, you understand how they think, how they tick, what drives them, what gets them out of bed at night, in the morning to do what they do. And then you're either buying into it or you don't. And
you have to trust. Trust is a key word. Because if I'm going to expose you to my client, I want my client to come back to me with only one statement. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
That's the key. And that comes out of time, getting to know someone, and the trust element as well.
Right.
I know with Jordan and I, right? Now we talk to a lot of people who have partnerships, whether it's husband or wife, which is always much more difficult than two people who've become friends. There's usually a yin and a yang. Do you guys have are you guys both the yins? Are you both the yangs? Or do you guys have a yin and a yang together?
So we don't work together that much anymore. Like Norman has his team, I have my team, and we kind of work separately on different deals. But when we work together, we're we co-counsel on deals from now at this point, because we've been doing it so long, we can pretty much finish each other's sentences. So I wouldn't say one is the yin, one is the yang. It's just we're both together on everything.
When there are moments, though, when we are working together, we've had this, we actually sometimes divide up who's the good guy, who's the bad guy.
Yeah.
So we can, and it is entertaining because we know we're playing the role. When you let the person go a little, but give them enough of a leash to do that and have a good time because you're trying to achieve a certain end in mind and make a certain impression. So that's the, if you want to call it at best, that's probably the yin and yang. But we're similarly wired. We're both out there. We're both network people, both relationship people. We kind of play off of that a little bit.
So how did you design that? You've got your own team. I'm assuming it's to complement your strengths and weaknesses, and you have your own team for the same to work and
Right.
divide and conquer, so to speak. How did that all come about? I'd love to hear how you went from I opened up my law firm to where you are today.
People ask us all the time, what's the secret sauce? How do you get people? How do you get clients? What have you? I wish I could give you a good answer, Bobby. I mean, the reality is it's just fortuitous. Sometimes people come around and you get referrals to potentially good attorneys. There's a lot of attorneys out there. What I always say is there's very few good attorneys. And by good, I mean not just technically good. People have to have people skills. They have to be able to communicate. I've worked with some tremendous attorneys, accountants, financial planners, insurance people, advisors, but they never can look you in the eye. They're always looking down. They're shaking hands like this. And they're not instilling confidence in the people that they're working with. They may be brilliant. What we look for are people who can not only do the job, but can communicate it as well. And so we've been fortunate in being able to find just those right people. And what I think happens over time is when you get too big, you got to constantly feed the beast. So we never wanted to grow to the size of these big firms because at a certain point in time, you just have to compromise your standards and bring people in who aren't the best, but they fulfill a function. We don't want that. We'd rather be able to utilize people from the outside who we know who are very good and complement our team, who can help our clients or whatever the situation is. And we know that they're the best at what they do, like we are, and they communicate well. So we're happy to stay small. We're happy to stay efficient. We're happy to stay, like I said, we don't have a lot of BS in our office. We just have a good time and that's it.
So you guys focus a lot on both the merger side, right? Company wanting
Right.
to get bigger, wanting to acquire other companies in order to help them do that or to diversify out whatever it is that they're doing now that's going to, complement their existing business. You guys also do the sale end, right?
Sure.
You work for the people who are selling their own businesses and they're looking for an exit strategy out. What do you see in your world as being the more active part of your day or your practice? The people that are looking to grow or people who are looking to find their way out to their next stage in life?
Well, I think right now it's primarily sell side.
Sell side?
A lot of sellers out there looking for the exit for a couple of reasons. COVID had a big impact on people. A lot of businesses went out of business as a result of it. And those who survived are now saying, I'm not sure I'm going to survive the next downturn. So let me take my chips off the table while I can.
Now, is it survive or do you think that it's more been there, done it, I don't know if I want to do it again?
Well, exactly. There's a lot of different mindsets out there and America's getting older primarily. And so we're seeing a lot of sellers who are saying, you know what? I thought my kids could do this. Either they can't do it or they don't want to do it or what have you. And I'd rather get the money in my family's pocket so that I create generational wealth for them and they don't have to worry about it. Or the owner is just tired of doing what he or she is doing, or the business has changed so dramatically that they don't enjoy it anymore. Or as you began to allude to before, they can't find employees anymore. It's a tough business market today. So a lot of sellers are saying, you know what? I've done well. Thank you very much. Help me sell my business.
It's a changing market too. With e-commerce has really changed how the market perceives how business is done.
I was just about to say, how has technology played a role in that?
Enormously.
Evolution
It's had an impact on business. And, it's an expensive process to maintain technology. It's not cheap. I know.
You
do know. To be current, and it's not just software. It's the hard stuff too. It's the hardware as well. It's tough. It's expensive. And the question is, can you maintain it? Do you have the budget for it? What is it going to cost? How do you run a business while maintaining the technology and maintaining competitiveness with your competitors? So it's tough. The one interesting thing is, you talk about all this is part under the umbrella of succession planning, which is a really tough issue, particularly for family-owned businesses. And it's tough, obviously, for those who don't, because what do I do? Do I have employees who are competent enough to take over the business? Do I want to take that risk? People talk about ESOPs. Do I have the right people in the right seats to do that? So I'll find my money and I'll keep my money. And then you deal with family-owned businesses, and they're an animal unto themselves, which is really tough on the business owner and the first, second generation, which is running it.
So I had a guy call me the other day. He's turning 80 years old this year. And he called because he said he wants to work on a succession plan. I said, okay, tell me about your business. He told me about his business. And he said that his son, who's been running the business for the past 10 or so years, who just turned 55, is now, in his words, capable of running the business. He's learned enough at 55 years old. So I'm thinking to myself, the father's 80 years old, the son's 55 years old. I get calls from guys a lot younger than 55 saying to us that they're ready to sell their business. This dad is now saying he's ready to turn his business over to his son at 55 years old. So it's all a mindset, you know?
You know, I talk about my family business often as well. And when I was in my family business after I left Wall Street, the biggest reason why I left was I said, I don't want to be the 55-year-old man underneath his 80-year-old father's thumb.
There you go.
You know, I got to carve my own path. I need to do my own thing. That's not something that I want to find my life, living the next 30 years in that capacity. So, you know, it's tough because it's more the mindset of the generation that's going to be succeeding it down than it necessarily is the capability of maybe the generation that's taking it over.
Well, you got to look at it as well, too. If some people, the business is their life, that's a tough succession plan. They don't want to let go.
We're in a position right now where we've been looking to acquire. And what's interesting is we came across one of those situations where it was the father who was running the firm, the son who was, the father was the founder of the firm. The son was owning the firm, was running the firm. And the son was like, listen, I'm almost 60. There's no me taking over. Like, it's time to get out. Like, I want to sell now. And the son was ready to sell before the fight. He says, if you take over the firm, you just give my dad an office just so this way he has a place to go.
Yep.
And that was something where Jordan and I looked at each other and we're like, I don't know if this is the right fit.
Yep.
Because it could be difficult, right?
For
It
sure.
could be very difficult, very tough. Listen, I had a client whose father, he was the CEO. His son came in as the president. They had been there together for a while. But the father recognized over time, he's never going to be able to monetize his interest in the business because the son will never be able to run it with him not being there. That's a tough conversation.
It sure is.
How do you deal with, we have a situation right now with a internal succession, and the father had built a business. The son kind of took over, and it is let's call it a every year is a new year. So they have to go and they have to find their business. It's very transactional. Mm-hmm. And the son has really been the one who's built the business. But now the father's saying, I want an exit strategy. And the son is going, exit strategy? You kind of made your money, and I've been the one who's running the business, building the relationships, creating new relationships. What kind of strategy do we put in place? Do you guys see any of that? I mean, what's kind of been your experience in terms of that conflict of first generation, second generation?
Who owns the equity in the business? Does the dad own the equity?
The dad owns the equity.
That's a tough situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, first things first, lawyers will tell you, well, let's take a look at the underlying documents. Is there a shareholders agreement? Is there an operating agreement, depending upon the type of the entity, right? But the reality of the situation is it depends who's bringing in the money. Because if the son is bringing in the money and the dad wants to get paid for it, the son may say, look, I'm not going to pay you for it. So as you said before, here's a desk, enjoy yourself, or head down to Florida, sit in your condo and have a good time. There's no right or wrong answer here. Unfortunately, many times that results in a sale of the business because you don't want to break up the family.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day.
But the reality is, too, if the son thinks he's entitled, if the son thinks he's capable, and the father says, I don't think so. It's a tough conversation. The situation that I had was the father ended up selling the business because he realized he sold it for an enormous amount of money. But because he realized the son could never run the business, and his advisors told him the same thing. It was a very tough conversation. The father and the son had a difficult time for years to come.
We work with a business psychologist, and that's fascinating because there's no such thing as a functional family. Every family is dysfunctional, according to the psychologist anyway. And he comes in and he'll work with the various generations to try to bridge the gap, if you will, in situations like you're describing. So he's working with a situation now he's telling me about that we're going to get involved in. A guy sold his business. He made approximately, called $300 million. And immediately he formed a family office. And there was no purpose or no design to the family office. He hired a CEO, he hired a CFO, and he's got 2 daughters, 2 sons, and 2 son-in-laws. And he put them all in as executives in this family office. But they don't have roles per se because nothing was defined. So they're fighting. So they brought in this business psychologist, and he's trying to help them define, first of all, what their direction is, and secondly, what everybody's role is going to be. And sometimes people's best role is not having a role, so we'll see what happens.
One of the interesting things is, and I'm sure you guys, and I'd love to hear some stories in terms of how how you guys have experienced it, but people, when they're working together, and whether it's a family organization or it's just could be your law firm, people, as long as there's no communication and transparency about certain things, people start to create these expectations. And when the expectations are not the same and they're not aligned, longer time that goes by, those expectations start to become a formed reality.
That's right.
And to come in and break that mentality up to say, yeah, what you've been thinking all these years, it's not really the truth. So let's start over and let's make this work. How do you make it successful at that point?
Listen, the key with all this is communication. If you don't communicate and you let rumors persist or you let certain behavior persist, you're just asking for trouble. You're asking for an absolute destruction.
But how many people are a decade or more into that kind of a relationship where they go, oh shit.
Many, and sometimes you can't help it. And that's what corporate divorce is all about. Sometimes it's cheaper to break up that entity, not kill the goose that lay the golden egg, but have somebody leave the business. Perhaps everybody's mutually dissatisfied, but somebody leaves the business to keep the business going. Because the worst thing, and we've seen this before, businesses break up over not business reasons, they break up over pride or they break up over social reasons, which is unfortunate because you have to also look at all the families that business feeds. Not everybody is making $1 million a year. And the families that are working for that business are the ones that suffer as well. So what we try to do is explain to clients right out of the box, listen, you can continue in this unproductive, unhealthy situation, or we can try to address it right away. And it's going to be painful. There's no doubt about it. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's no different than any just dysfunctional family without a business.
Right.
It's the same thing. What you're not taking into account is the people who are not working the business, the family members who are making money from the business and living a certain lifestyle. How do we address those? Again, that plays all into the dysfunctionality and what happens and what do you do with the business?
So I want to play a little game of worst best. Why don't you guys give me a couple of the worst scenarios that you guys have come across to either where you have had to do a complete overhaul and it's been successful for you and able to do it, or you just haven't been able to get anywhere and there was an ultimate breakup or dissolution or something that happened from it.
I'll start with that one. So long time ago, it doesn't matter how long ago, we represented a business that was a consultant to the pharmaceutical industry. It was owned by 2 sisters. And one of the sisters came to us and she said that her sister was stealing from her and the business was thriving, but she couldn't continue to work with her sister. 5 years later, over $500,000 in legal fees later, just for us, the other sister, same amount at another well-respected law firm that we work with quite often, ultimately decided that the other sister would buy out our client for $18,000 because they both spent
all their money on legal fees.
All their money on legal fees. We come to find out at the final settlement that this whole thing was not about one sister stealing from the other sister. The whole thing started over a Thanksgiving dinner where one sister was speaking to their father and explained something to their father that the other sister said was a lie, and they had words, and it stemmed from that. And they hated each other ever since.
It's amazing what can fester off or something like that, huh?
So we said, no turkey for you. And the whole thing blew up. $18,000. Can you believe it? It was unbelievable. We were happy. We got $500,000 in legal fees, but all kidding aside, that's not a good way for a deal to end. That's ridiculous.
No, I mean, listen, we have our litigation partner always says litigation is a sport of kings. And he's absolutely correct. It's an enormous amount of money involved when you start to litigate. You better have a deep pocket. We do love clients who, right off the bat say, I don't care what it costs. I want to sue. I want to do this, until they get the first or second month's bill, and they realize, wait a second, is there a settlement possibility here? Because they're not realistic on what takes place and what it costs. But the story goes in a little bit different twist to it. Many years ago, I started as a tax attorney. That's what I wanted to do. I thought that'd be fun until I got in the business side and realized that's a little bit better.
Wait. So what did you think was going to be fun about tax?
I like trust and estate work.
Okay.
That type of thing. And, I have an LLM in taxation. That's what I wanted to do. And then I had the opportunity to do some business deals. And I said, that's better. I like that. I like the concept of putting the pieces of a puzzle together, of people trying to get to the same end. They may have disagreements on how to get there, but the same goal in mind. And I thought that I liked that element of it. But I had a case where I drafted a will for parents. And one son was in the business, one was not. And so before they're going to sign the will, I went through the whole explanation of have you read the will? Do you understand what it says? All the things that you do before a will is signed to make sure they fully understand it. They have the capacity to understand it. And so the father provided in his will that the son working in the business was going to get all the equity in the business. Mm-hmm. The wife read the will and said, absolutely not. You can't do this to your other son. I said, well, have you talked about it? No, we never talked about it. It's not going to happen. She goes, I'm not signing my will. You're not signing your will. And they looked at me and said, do you mind leaving the room? And I was gone for a good half an hour and it got a little loud inside of there. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, I found that years later, they sold the business because they couldn't agree on what was going to happen. There was no way to bridge the gap between what the mother wanted for the son not in the business and what the father wanted for the son in the business.
Equalization is an interesting conversation.
Always.
Yeah, because the energy and effort that one puts toward running a business versus the now silent partner, that's also I've seen as a total recipe for disaster.
But businesses too, it's interesting in family business because notwithstanding that you may not like one another, it's interesting how it's a family and you try to recognize that. There was a great article in the New York Times several years ago about a family that sold the business. Relatives were involved in the business. And the patriarch said, and we would get together on holidays and Thanksgiving, even though we didn't like one another that much, it was a reason to get together. He goes, but we sold the business, created a family office for my side of the family with our money. I thought I'd be busy managing our money. And then I realized we don't get together for the holidays anymore. He says that's he sad. Goes, yeah, he said, that's really, as much as we didn't get along that well, it was still a reason to get together as a family. And we don't do that. He goes, I miss that. That's disappointing.
Listen, if you don't handle it correctly, money can totally tear apart a family just in that way.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to do that either.
No, it's a lot of it's pride and ego,
yes,
right?
That's right.
I mean, personalities start to come out in different ways when you're brothers and sisters versus business partners.
100%. 100%.
Listen, that's the same thing. We do this all the time. And we have people come to us and say, listen, we want to start up a business. This is my best friend, my boyhood friend, or this is my brother. I love him dearly. We want to start up the business. So we start off by saying, okay, that's fine. Here's a questionnaire we want you to look at. Okay, because you should have an agreement. Now's a great time for you to sit down. You're in the right frame of mind. You're in a positive frame of mind. You need to have an agreement. Stuart said before, shareholders agreement or an operating agreement. Agreement that defines the relationship between the parties from both a management perspective, a financial perspective, and certainly ownership perspective. Now's the time you're in a great mood because we've seen it time and time again when people don't do that. And your best friend who you trusted, who you grew up with, had a different work ethic. Your brother had a different work ethic. Your sister did, whatever it is. And that relationship, shockingly to all of us, deteriorates. And if you don't have an agreement in place with some way to map out what you decide should happen, you're going to have somebody else make that decision for you, and it's not going to go well.
It's a difficult conversation that it's amazing how people avoid it. There are times where I've seen shareholders agreements that are done and redlined, but not done and redlined. They were started and redlined, but they were not completed and signed because they gave up somewhere in the middle and they said, this is good enough.
Or we'll work it out.
Yeah. And when everything is good, it's good. But when everything starts to turn sour, that's when, we really see what a person.
Well, that's
As I like to say, when the sun sets in the east.
Right.
Yes.
We see convenient amnesia all the time. And, it's scary because that's what causes people to fight. And it's all about money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's very sad, very sad. That's why we kind of try to push people to do everything they should do when they form their business, not just create the company and get to work. You have to make sure you understand who's going to be responsible for what and which lane are you going to play in.
What do you think is the biggest barrier that people put up to not doing those things in the beginning? Do you think it's ignorance? Do you think it's money? Do you think it's
I think it's a
everything is great and
combination.
we're going to be fine?
It's a combination of it's not that important in the moment. People are worried about getting their business started, right? They got to make the widgets. They got to sell the widgets. So worrying about succession planning and what have you, I'll do that later. Also, they don't understand the importance of it. So if you don't understand the importance of it, then it doesn't have relevance in the moment. So it's people like you and like us and their accountants, they're trusted advisors. I hate saying that, but they're advisors who have to actually force them to do it. And we try, but you can't put a pen.
Money is a factor as well. We'd rather use the money in the business for operating capital and spend it on legal fees. But we try to explain to them, by the way, this is a living document. Your relationship will change over time. All right. So what you draft today, depending on where the relationship goes, you can change it. You can change it at any point in time as it grows, as your roles change, as your interests change, as your family grows.
It's easier to have a starting point than to continuously put off that starting point.
We tell people the day you start your business is the day you start to plan to sell your business. And it's kind of true if you think about it, but people really don't pay attention to that because.
So I get that. I want you to expand on that for our listeners though.
When you start a business, you're aggressive theoretically, you are motivated to grow this business, you're meeting a ton of people. You never know when that unsolicited offer is going to come in from somebody who says, you know what, I like what you have here. I want to buy your business. And the case in point is what happened in the early 2000s when people were buying businesses that were pre-revenue. These were terrible business ideas, but yet there was so much money out there and there was such a zeal and a zest for buying businesses that people were buying these crazy ideas.
Yeah, that happened again just a couple of years ago.
Exactly. So somebody would be in business for a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden they'd get, offers for tens of millions of dollars. So we always say to people for that reason, you got to be prepared. And if you don't have your proverbial shit together when you start your business, you're behind the eight ball right away. So that's why you need your shareholders agreement or your operating agreement. You need to lock up your employees. That's another thing that people don't do. Norman, come on board, join me. It's going to be great. I run a technology company. Help me design X, Y, and Z software. Well, now you got to sell your business. Norman has a right to your software. You got to lock that up. You got to do the things properly. Otherwise, you're going to delay your sale, or that $10 million purchase price is going to turn to a $1 million purchase price.
So what are some of the things that you've seen? Because, the successes are always great, right? Somebody comes in with a huge check and it's like, is that enough money? And am I planning for all the right things of locking in the employees? But there's also the flip side of that, which is you're anticipating that this is going to be worth something. And then all of a sudden you go to market and you're like, oh, I never really planned to grow this to an amount that I needed to live on for the rest of my life. I thought I was going to get that $10 million check, but my company's actually only worth maybe 6. And I never really thought about it, but I'm going to have to pay a lot of taxes in this also. Mm-hmm. So I'm not walking away with 6. What are some of the things that let's go back to case studies, examples of clients who've come and who have said, I want to sell my business, and they were just nowhere near where they thought they were.
We had a client years ago, had a very, very successful business, had an enterprise value of about $125 million. And this is back in the early 2000s. It was a family-owned business. The father had spread the stock around, voting and non-voting stock, to various members of the family, but 2 of the older brothers were running the business. They were approached by an investment banker to sell the business. Great time, good pricing, et cetera. We're starting to go through the process, and one of the brothers comes to the realization. He says, if we sell this business even for what appears to be a good price, a good value, the money I'm going to get out of the business and then the after-tax dollars I'm going to get from the sale, I have a better lifestyle now. Why would I sell it? I can't do that. I can't sell. And that changed the whole landscape. It went from, hey, we have a real opportunity here. We have a potential buyer, that this is not a good price to sell. Now, it may seem like a lot of money, but the reality is it depends on their lifestyle.
Well, it depends on their proportionate share too, because you said there's a bunch of different people who have different share ownership.
Well,
right?
they couldn't live. They couldn't live outside the company in the lifestyle they wanted to if they sold the company and walked away with X dollars. So you have to think about that as well. You have to be realistic, and the first person you really have to talk to about that is somebody like you. You really do, and say, okay, this is how much money I have set aside. If I sell the business for this, and I walk away with this, what am I left with? How can I live? Do I have to change my lifestyle? But I don't want to. How do I manage that? Stuart and I always talk about the different legs of a stool. Who's key in the process? One of the key people really is your investment advisor. Okay, someone who knows your money, knows how you live. You have to have that conversation. Otherwise, you'll go to market and not recognize it doesn't fit into the plan.
Now, do you find yourself consulting people and having to say, hey, come back after you've done this?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's going to take you 5 years to put this together.
Absolutely.
And do you see that often?
We play the long game all the time because we'd be doing a disservice to people just saying, sure, come on and we'll sell your business. It's foolish. It's not going to benefit anybody. The flip side to what you asked is also very interesting. A lot of people come in and they say, I'm going to sell my business for $100 million. We say, that's fantastic. We hope you do.
Who's going to buy it?
Right. Who's going to buy it? And is that really what you need? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? We'll say, well, let's take a look at your business. Let's take a look at your lifestyle. How much are you, quote unquote, putting through the business? What do you really need to live on? And they find out that, by the way, it's an ego thing to sell it for $100 million when they can sell it for real for $70 million or something like that. So that's another conversation that we have. But as Norman said, we bring in people like you, we bring in the accountants, we bring in the investment bankers as well, because it's nice to say I want to sell it for 100, but maybe nobody's buying it for 100, right?
We had a deal with a client, and this is going back a couple of years ago, where he was the CEO and had a good portion of the business, but the founder was still an integral part of the operations. And he said, listen, he wants 10 million. Actually, that was the number. He wants a $10 million check in order to get out of here. And I don't know if he's really understanding exactly how this works. So we went through an exercise to understand, is it really just, do you want that $10 million? Do you want to be able to see a check and go, I got $10 million for my business, even though you're really only going to put $6 million in your pocket? Or do you want to try to get $7 million by structuring the deal correctly? Is more money but a lower dollar figure, more money in your pocket, more appealing to you? Or do you just want that $10 million? So at the end of the day, you know what he said?
What did he say?
I want the $10 million on the check.
Really? And so
needed
ego thing.
He wanted that.
Right.
That's what he wanted.
So I'll give you another example. I use this all the time. Clients will come in and they'll say, I want to sell my business for the best price possible. Okay. So I'll say to them, all right, Sally, you're going to sell your business. Norman made you an offer of $10 million. Sounds good, right? Absolutely. I'll sell my business. But Bobby comes in and he offers you $100 million. Who are you going to sell it to, Norman or Bobby? Client naturally says, I'm going to sell it to Bobby. And then I say, did Bobby tell you that he's going to pay you $1 a year for $100 million?
What are the terms?
Yeah. Clients too often. Did you ask what the terms were?
Right.
Oh, no.
Oh, right. By the way, do they have the money to buy it? Oh, I don't know.
I just had the case recently where my client received a letter of intent. I marked it up, changed it. We talked about it. And the client said, okay, let me talk to the buyer. And part of the condition was someone had to sell a business. So I said, where's the money coming from?
Right.
Where are you coming? And so I called him up the next day, said, how'd the conversation go? So he goes, well, they're hoping to sell the other business by the end of the year, maybe early next year. I said, so why have they approached you with a letter of intent then if they don't have any capital? Well, they thought it'd be interesting to have the conversation. People also too, the problem is people listen to the radio and watch TV and they hear these multiples on publicly traded companies and say, wow, I'm in the same industry. I should be entitled to receive. Well, any good investment banker is going to say, no, you're a private company. And by the way, you have customer concentration issues. You don't have your employees locked up, as Stu said, so you got exposure on your intellectual property. or or you don't have written contracts. You work by POs. You don't necessarily have recurring income or revenue, which buyers love and want to have, and which creates value for a company. These are things, we have these talks with the clients sometimes. And listen, sometimes they say, I get it. I just need to get out. As Stuart said, it's the time. Other times they say, well, you mean I won't get this price for it? No, you won't. But that's when you started the conversation earlier. How far in advance, when you're thinking of the end game, should you really start to evaluate and go through your quote checklist, your seller's checklist, as far as what do I need to have in place to maximize value, minimize risk in the eyes of the buyer?
So you guys have been through multiple transactions, multiple personalities, and dealing with different deals and structures. What is one of the, I would say, I'm going to ask this in two different ways, right? What is one thing that has, or one case that has kind of kept you up at night because you maybe either look at it and you say, this has impacted the way I do business, or I'm afraid that this might happen to me, or it was just something where you knew that there was something that was more personally tied to the way that you guys run your own business?
We did a deal about a decade ago at this point where a client had come to us 10 years before that, small business. This guy's father developed a machine that extruded a certain type of product, and ultimately he built it up. He bought 4 businesses over that 10-year period. He went from 25 people plus or minus working for him. When we sold the business, ultimately, it was about 350, 400 people. Sold the business for 9 figures. And I remember when we closed that deal, it was a tremendous source of pride because we saw it basically from its infancy to its sale. But at the same time, it was sort of emotionally taxing and very sad because I developed a relationship with not only my client, but with his family at that point. I mean, I had one of my kids working for him over the summer at one point. And when he sold the business, the private equity, it was no longer a business with a personality.
Mm-hmm.
It was truly just a business at that point. And he's done extremely well with other ventures and what have you. But the emotion tied to selling a business, even though it wasn't mine, but helping them grow that business from 1 to 1,000 was very emotional at the closing. So I remember the night before we closed, I said to my wife, Cheryl, I said, it's going to be a great day and it's going to be a really sad day at the same time. And I try to explain it to her, but it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain. It's hard to feel unless you go through it, because we don't just give people our expertise and our knowledge. I think part of what differentiates us, and people ask us all the time, what is it? We literally put our heart and soul into what we do. You don't stay up for 15 hours straight working on a deal or what have you because you're worried about getting that extra $100 at the end of the day. You want to do right by people, right? And representing sellers, it makes us feel good when at the end of the day, the seller says, hey, thank you very much. Yeah. That's a really good job. And that's why we don't want to do billion-dollar deals, because billion-dollar deals,
you get to see the people that you're impacting versus, these big deals where they're miles away.
That's right. They're run by middle-level managers who are afraid of losing their paycheck. So all they want to do is make sure that nothing goes wrong so that their boss doesn't say you're out of here.
Nobody's pointing the finger at anybody then.
What are some of the things that you would impart to our audience to where you would say, hey, here are some things you should think about as you build your business, as you think about whether it's family business or in a succession, or it's selling a business, or it's you're going out and you want to grow through acquisition. What are some of the, the things that you've learned in your experience to where you want to say, hey guys, this isn't the whole story, but I want you to remember these couple things?
Yeah, I would say find the right professionals to hire along the way. I always remember years and years ago when I was a little kid, my father had a small business and he wanted to grow the business. So I remember the story. He went to his accountant to list, there's a target a company I want to buy. They do a little bit like I do. I think it'd be a good move. And the accountant said, well, whatever you want to do. You don't want to hire a professional that says whatever you want to do.
Yes, men are the worst.
Yeah, no, they add nothing. You want to hire a professional who adds value beyond what they are as a professional. You want them to use their experience, impart that to you, even if it's to give both sides of the story, but then to help you guide, to add you, to let you go to the next step. Right? That's the important thing. And if you don't hire the right professionals, they're going to be a drain on you. You want someone that's going to add value. That would be my best advice: is hire the right professionals, people of experience. Doesn't have to be the biggest firms. We're not the biggest firm, but hire a professional who has the experience, who has a knowledge base, and other people say, wow, they really helped me go forward.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have the person who's steering you and pushing you in the right direction, because they're just saying whatever you want,
Right.
are you actually going to get out and attain the goal that you're looking to get?
Right.
That's great. That's great. How about for you, Stu?
I have 3 pieces of advice.
Yes.
Hopefully I remember them as we go through.
We
this.
love threes. Everyone loves threes.
Right. So the first piece of advice kind of picks up on where Norman was, which is we're not afraid to say no. You know, if people come to us and they have an idea, we're very happy to tell them that they're either wrong or that they can't do it, or frankly, that they're full of shit if they are. And we explain why we believe that to be the case. Oftentimes, people who have employees, as you probably know, you ask your employee, hey, is this a good idea? What do you think they're going to say?
Yes, boss.
Exactly. The third piece of advice is sellers sell based on past results, but buyers buy based upon future potential. So when you're representing a seller, whether it's you as a financial professional, the accountant, the investment banker, the lawyer, what have you.
Last 3 years of P&Ls. Come on, let me see them.
Exactly. You have to explain to your client that it's great that you achieved X, but realize that the buyer is going to come in there and going to say, you could have done better and the price is going to go down for this reason, when they really don't care what happened in the past because they're looking at what they can do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand that as a seller or conversely as a buyer, you're doing yourself a disservice and your advisors have done you a disservice.
So guys, any other parting remarks before we head out of here? Because I also want you to say, how do we find you if we're looking, how do the listeners find you if they're looking to get in touch?
I guess, online through references, we deal with a lot of people out in the business world. As Stuart said earlier, accountants, investment advisors, investment bankers, we're out there. Talk to your friends, talk to people talk to business owners. The one thing, I don't take the pat on ourselves too much. Having been in-house, Stuart and I, and having seen a business from the inside out, we have a different feel for a business owner and what takes place and understanding the business owner's mindset, which is key for us. And we like to work with a business owner. We often, Stuart does it, I get it, call some clients who just want to have a conversation. What do you think of this idea that I have in mind? It's a great value that we can add and be able to do that.
Well, it's the experience that you guys bring, because it's not something where you're like, I was born this smart and I know everything. No, you've been through different trials and tribulations and different iterations of businesses and how they were bought, sold, merged, and the otherwise, how they failed. And by seeing all of that over the years brings a tremendous amount of value to people who are looking to say, hey, guys, what do I do?
Right. Well, remember, we're business owners too.
Right.
We run a business. And I think that's important for people to recognize, We're not suggesting that we have all the answers, but we've seen a lot at this point in our careers.
Not sitting in the ivory tower, just fulfilling a role. You guys are boots on the ground, dealing with the day-to-day. You started from nothing and you grew it to to something.
Right, exactly.
Websites, social media, we'll throw it all in the comment box. I appreciate you guys and your time for coming.
Thank
Bobby,
you for
thank you
having
for
us.
giving us
All right,
this time.
that's a wrap.
Thank you.